your quality system is the most important part of the company, because if it gets through them, it should be good, right? And if it's like after it's touched everybody's hands, that's kind of the ISO mentality, is your quality system is key, and it's the most important part of the whole company. And they make the decisions over the CFO, the CEO, I should say. And if that part's no good, you're not using it. I don't care what you're saying.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The journey of ISO could feel overwhelming with the amount of standardization and documentation required. But if your machine shop never served a regulated industry, it could be a great start as you expand your market to other sectors such as aerospace, defense, or automotive. You will not only be required to change your processes and procedures, but you need to game up on training and documentation. In today's episode, we have our guest, Derek Hall, who describes the importance of ISO compliance and why it's necessary for shops to grow. He also discusses what non-ISO shops need to know about ISO compliance and how the processes of ISO compliant shops differ from non-ISO shops. Finally, he shares important concepts such as audit requirements and the importance of visual cues on the shop floor. Let me introduce Derek to you. Derek grew up working in a family restaurant, the famous Batista's Hole in the Wall on the Las Vegas Strip, to music, action sports, and the last 10 years handling over $4 million in projects a year in precision manufacturing and business development. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Derek, welcome to the show.
Hey Sam, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Hey, I am doing wonderful and I am super excited to have you on the show. We have been waiting for this moment for a long time. So here we are.
Yeah, we've been playing DM tag for the last couple months on how to make this happen. I'm glad we finally aligned these schedules.
I know. So let's kick things off. Do you want to kick things off with your personal story and current focus?
Oh, sure. How much time you got? Because I've been through a lot. So,
it's your show, brother. You can take as long as you want.
Well, I grew up here in Las Vegas, started working real young on the Strip. My grandpa owned a restaurant, Batista's Hole in the Wall on the Strip, and, learned the importance of, customer focused and customer service real quick, because, if you didn't have it, you didn't eat.
Yeah.
So after that, I got a little rebellious and wanted to chase my musical dreams, and went off from there and, went into marketing and toured with bands and did all that stuff, and hence the tattoos.
Yeah.
And then had a child and had to get a real job. So my brother happened to be quality manager for ISO 9001 certified company, cryogenic pump manufacturer out here in Las Vegas. And I went over as just, the receiving guy, just, to get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And then I worked there for a little bit, and I did everything, everything. We even had to rewrite the ISO procedures and for receiving. They still use them to this day. And they had a position for project management, and I showed some interest in this gentleman. He's a rocket scientist, Fabian. He came in and asked me if I wanted it, and I said yeah, and I went and worked for him, and oh wow. It was cool. I was with that company for about 6 years, headed out, got asked to come and actually run their one of the machine shops that worked for this company was retiring and asked me to come and take over. So I was actually still working with the cryo pump manufacturer just through the machining aspect of things now. So I just, I got to see how we did it there, and now I get to see how they make it over here. And they were also an ISO and AS certified shop. And I've pretty much only ever, in manufacturing, I've only worked for ISO, AS being the last couple years, but ISO mainly my whole career in manufacturing. And after that, I tried to start my own shop.
Yeah.
And me and my brother tried to give it a go, but a few things didn't work out for us. And so now I'm at.
Okay, amazing. All right, so you have had very crazy journey, obviously a lot of diverse background as well. You did a lot of uncool things, such as tattoos and music.
Yeah.
But then you are doing a lot of cool things, such as ISO. That is music to my ears.
It's funny because, a guy like me, when you see me, you wouldn't think I would be in this kind of field or, take an interest in something like that. But, watching the processes and stuff like that and how things are done, it's totally awesome. It's actually really fun.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm telling you. Okay, so we have one more standard question that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Well, the last shop I was in, they were actually just ISO so compliant. They weren't actually certified. They were actually, I was trying to speed up the process because, getting ISO certified is a heck of a process, and it's a long process, and you got to, cross your T's and dot your lowercase J's. And so going through that process is kind of interesting, but you can be successful just being ISO compliant, but you're very, very, very limited on certain things you can and can't do, but so it's to make that investment to go full ISO is a good long-term investment if you have the ISO, contracts. But since there's not a whole lot of those ISO companies out there, or ISO machine shops in general, tier 2 kind of shops, getting an ISO cert is, you have a pretty good chance of getting business just because you have that certification. And I would say it was an interesting process going, because I actually never saw the startup process. I've always worked for the company that's always had it done. And then, we went through training to learn, all the processes and procedures for ISO. Yeah. And so to see the company actually, have to go through that process was very interesting and kind of boring.
Yeah.
There's a lot of meetings and a lot of, wow, okay. So it's pretty interesting. It's once you get it though, it makes sense as to why they do it this way. Just for accountability and making sure these parts are not going to break under extreme pressure, and from the material aspect of things. And so even then, when you have to order material, you're only, you have to, certain countries you can only order from, and certain places you can only order from or send to for outside processing and all sorts of things. But for the growth aspect of things, I think it's really good for a shop to do something like that, because you guys got buyers that are just constantly searching for new shops and all sorts of things. There's so many ISO things out there that these shops aren't grasping and doing that they can be. But sorry, that's probably further into the conversation. We'll go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we are going to be doing now. So let's paint the picture overall from the ISO perspective. So obviously you have worked on a lot of different machine shops, tier 1, tier 2. So I know that ISO is going to be very important for the shop. But overall, if you were to describe ISO to anybody, okay, and which industries it is going to be relevant in, are these going to be just the automotive and the aerospace machine shops, or is it across the manufacturing ecosystem? So describe what exactly is ISO and which industries and the ecosystem such as tier 1, tier 2 are going to require some sort of ISO.
Well, ISO is a standard that cryo, oil and gas and automotive, because there's different branches of ISO. I would say my background is ISO 9001. and aerospace, AS, and
Okay.
what I think was it D, Rev D now. But it's just a standard that these companies make sure that you use to make sure that the guy the like that everything is done basically correctly down, because the tolerances are so tight. The applications, for these parts are so detrimental in some things to certain situations that you have to have these processes and procedures in place, or you're killing people.
Yeah.
People. That's how important these parts are made. So an ISO procedure in place or any kind of thing like that, I think ISO compliance for any shop in general would be a good thing to have in every shop, just
Okay.
to go through those processes and procedures, just so it just makes you, it dials it in more. You're more focused. You can see everything that's going on. You got all the proper paperwork. You got nobody can call and complain because you have all this stuff and it is all documented. And it's kind of a pain in the butt, but it saves your butt in the long run.
Yeah.
And it helps you. And I don't think every shop should go ISO by any means, but I think they should at least take some ISO courses and implement some of those things in their shops for sure.
Okay, so when we look at the ISO procedures, sometimes, and especially in the machine shop community, if there are going to be newer shops, I don't know how many of them really appreciate the overhead of ISO. Sometimes that could be perceived as unnecessary if it is not really making sense to them. So, for example, let's say if you look at the aerospace ecosystem, if you are working with either Boeing or Raytheon, then most likely what you need to do is you need to probably have the ISO and AS compliance at the tier one level because your Boeing is actually going to be auditing those. But I don't know how much that is mandated at the tier two level. I have heard in
Oh,
the community that some people don't necessarily follow the processes, even though they are claiming that they are certified, that nobody is really auditing them. So obviously there is a little bit of crack there. So what has
yeah.
been your experience? What would you recommend to these machine shops when they are going through, let's say, the ISO or AS? Tell me how much they should be complying. If they don't comply, what are the implications?
Well, the thing is, a lot of those aerospace companies, I haven't heard a lot of what you're hearing, but a lot of the aerospace companies are very particular. I mean, they're on your butt about it really
Yeah,
hard. And I would even say Nikiso, they're really strict on their ISO policies. I know the guys in their quality office are on it. Like they don't let really a whole lot. I didn't even say that. They don't let anything get by because
yeah,
they're and I know all those guys personally, and but they're doing their job. So I don't you know what I mean. And
yeah,
it's very 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 important. I've been audited by I've been ISO audited 100 times, and
yeah,
for little things and big things, I've by something as small as a bag of 100 pieces of screws. So I've worked with companies like Bombardier, Spirit, Triumph, um, things like that, and I know those guys personally
yeah,
um, don't let anything by. And as far as for shops, yes, not every shop needs it. Like you said, like no, and some of those shops definitely are not following procedures, and there are shops that try to slide things under the rug, or try to slide different stuff under the rug. I haven't personally seen it, but I have actually heard of these things,
yeah,
and they get in trouble. Once it gets found out, I've seen shops completely lose contracts because they try to slip something under the rug, like completely lose. You just lost a couple $100,000 a month. You don't want that just because you want to just try to skim something by, and
yeah.
that's a lot of money. And so following those procedures, yeah, not every shop needs it, but I mean, it's a good way to just keep track of things too, especially in AS. Well, they have the routers and stuff, or whatever everybody calls them, travelers, routers. Everybody has a different word for them at every company.
Yeah.
But each one is labeled. It's all separated, so you know which part you're working on for what company at what time. You know when it's done in both aspects of things. So you got the router that And this part, goes from machine shop tier 2 to tier 1. If it needs to be finished, that router gets finished there. And so that's how strict these guidelines are. And these shops
Yeah.
absolutely communicate with each other about this because they both, don't want to stop getting paid. And if you if you want to try to slide and I don't mean to, I'm not saying anything bad about any,
Yeah.
country's materials, but if you want to slide a foreign, material in there that's not allowed to be used and then just put a fake thing on there, it's going to get caught. It's,
Yeah.
it's not that easy to do anymore, especially as we grow in ISO. I know when I was working in the KISO, they pumped ISO down your throat. So it wasn't like, I wasn't saying it's a bad thing, but at the time I was really not happy about it because they're not the most fun courses, but they're really hard on it. And once I left there and saw the machining side of things, I can see why that is, because coming from just the tier 1 manufacturing where you're just getting the product and sending it to the customer, it's completely different. You kind of understand that process, but you don't, and then once you see it from the material aspect side of it and how it all works there, it fully comes together and you understand why ISO and AS is important.
Yeah, so some very interesting aspects there, and I am going to dig further into that, and that is going to be, for example, let's say you mentioned an example about the material.
Mm-hmm.
If you are probably going to replace the material, from my experience when I look at the machine shops, they are slightly more cognizant in replacing the material unless it is completely doable, right? I mean, the majority of the machine shops understand, which materials to use, which not to use, right? In case of AS, obviously, it is going to be super strict. If you need to make any changes, that needs to be approved by if you are a tier 1, then that needs to be approved by your OEM, right?
Yeah.
But in tier 2, I don't know if tier 2 are really getting approved by the tier 1. So now, so if the question is related to material, sometimes that could be doable. And again, I don't know if there is approval process. But if let's say if you are looking at some of the changes in your traveler or router, so the most common situation that I have personally seen in my experience, and this comes from the lean and continuous improvement, right? So lean and the ISO principles, they sort of conflict overall. And if you look at majority of the machine shop, they are really creative people. They want to get the job done, which is good. They want to save money. But sometimes you have to follow the process, even if that means that you are not necessarily saving money. So that's where the conflict is, in my experience. For example, let's say if you have to change the traveler or router, you have to get approval, and that is going to be in compliance with your AS certification, that you are not supposed to be changing things randomly. If you want to be AS compliant, and if you want to please these guys, OEM and the T1s, right, then you have to follow the process as designed. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And, there's a deviation process because for material all the time. And there are substitutes for those materials that you can use. Yeah. And that's okay. And, those companies will approve it. But I've seen, I personally, made the accident, where I've ordered a 932 brass. The part was 932, and I was looking at another part, and I ordered 954. Yeah. And we made the part, sent it to them, and it was completely, wrong. Yeah. But there's and they send it back, and we had to remake it. And because I didn't, see if I can do a deviation to see if that material would even work or anything like that. So that alone just got it, denied just because I didn't even start that process. And it will get denied, especially with the companies that I personally work for. If we've ever sent a part without the deviation, it's denied automatically, and they don't even want it anymore. They don't even want to try to see your deviation because it's like, you guys messed up. Make us a new one. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I totally get that too. And I'm sure there are absolute, companies that do the same thing. And I don't know, just in my personal experience, I know they've fully come after you and, send those things back. And, because you have to have a material separation when you have ISO and commercial stuff. Like when you go into a shop, and a lot of shops, there's shops that comply and there's a lot of shops that don't comply. And, when they hear an ISO is coming, then they'll, shimmy it over to another area. But you have to have material separation with ISO and AS. And if you don't, And especially, if they do like, if somebody comes up and wants to do a random spot check and you don't have that in line, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Then your customers are going to hear about it. They're going to, hey man, your stuff's not separated. They don't know, whose material is this. They don't know if that's from China and that's from Italy. How do they know? So the labeling process, the whole process and procedure aspect of things, yeah, absolutely, it helps.
Yeah. So in case of your material example, obviously that is going to be, I think, if somebody knows how this part is supposed to be done, right, they can figure out right away that you probably used a different one. But
Absolutely.
in case of when you are doing the machine change, sometimes that could be harder to spot. So in your experience, is that okay or is that not okay?
Not okay. I think you have to, you just got to be on your stuff at all the times. You got to treat every part like it's a new part, regardless if you've done it 100 times. Because I've seen it, done 100 times, and you messed it up 101st, and
No?
yeah, and I've seen that done, and so that's very, very important.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the shops that are not really the ISO compliant and they have the aspirations to go for ISO compliance.
Yeah.
And Derek, let's say if you look at these shops, you can tell by looking at them which one is ISO compliant and which one is not.
100%.
Okay, and one of the things that you are going to notice is going to be overall organization of the processes. The shop that are going to be ISO compliant are going to be slightly more organized. They will look as if they are following some sort of method in the shop. The other ones are not really going to do that. So let's say if they are going for the ISO journey, one part is you have to do the application, you have to go through your approval process, you have to do the audit. That's great. But before that, you have to do the process changes overall in terms of the way your shop is designed, in terms of the way your materials are issued, in terms of the way you sort of work on your job. I think everything has to follow the mindset of ISO. Mm-hmm. So let's say if somebody wants to get into the mindset of ISO from a shop that is not organized, where can they start? What is going to be their, let's say, 30, 60, 90, 180, 360-day plan in doing that?
Where you would start is your quality department. You got, if you have one.
Okay. So, yeah, fair enough.
I've seen shops where it's like, a guy sticks his thumb up next to it, looks good, and and I've seen shops with fantastic quality systems. And you know what? I always tell people, if you go into a machine shop and you don't see the quality procedure on the wall, walk out of there. Because if they don't care about their quality procedures, then they are. I wouldn't say they don't care. I'm just saying that should be number one. Because if you don't have a quality guy checking every part after it's done, then you're going. I'm not saying you're going to fail, but I'm saying you might produce more junk parts than good. So I would say you'd start with that, a good quality department, get yourself a good quality guy who knows the ISO, procedures. And even if you're not going ISO, just get somebody, if you have, or if you can, who's aware of it, pay him a decent amount of wage, and he'll make your quality system fantastic. And I think your quality system is the most important part of the company, because it's if it gets through them, it should be good, right? And if it's like after it's touched everybody's hands, that's kind of the ISO mentality, is your quality system is key, and it's the most important part of the whole company. And they make the decisions over the CFO, the CEO, I should say. And if that part's no good, you're not using it, I don't care what you're saying. And I don't care how big your paycheck is, they can tell you that. And that's important. And then you also need guys that can get yelled at a lot, because quality guys, I don't know, they have the privilege of bringing bad news, to people, and they always they're the messenger, so they always get the brunt end of the stick for doing their jobs correctly.
Yeah. So let's say if you are the tier 1 guy and you are trying to hire some of the vendors for your project. Okay, so you are shopping around, you are going to many different tier 2 shops. You see a wall where the quality is being written in your explanation. You said that, just show me the wall. And as long as you are writing there, I am cool. I am probably going to work with you.
Yeah.
But just because you are writing on a wall does not mean that you are complying
You're
and
right.
you are producing the parts with the quality. And that is going to mean that, let's say, if you hire this T2, then obviously you are going to be out of the budget on your project as a project manager. Okay, then
Yeah.
your job is going to be at risk. So
Yeah.
what can you do to ensure that, let's say, if you are working with a T2 as the project manager,
Yeah.
that whatever they are saying is being followed?
Well, I started that before I said, see the writing on the wall. I said make sure they
Yeah,
have a good quality system, and
yeah,
then so you have to just do your due diligence in any aspect, in any new project point of view.
yeah,
If somebody brings you, or you want to go, you got to focus and research what they do, how they do it, see if you can find somebody they've made parts for, and that's it. But ask to read their quality procedure. Everybody's got one, and that, especially in the ISO, they should be, books. Here it is. If you want to read it, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and, and it should be available like that as well. And it's, I know you're gonna pay more. It's like, it's the old tattoo expressions, good tattoos ain't cheap and cheap tattoos ain't good.
yeah,
And, that's just that's how machining parts are too. And so you have to just make sure that, especially from a project management standpoint, when I would have to go and buy material for my new projects, before
yeah,
there's a vetting, there's a thing to where the vendor has to be on your AVL. In tier one, you have an AVL and approved vendor list, and
yeah,
so you can only choose those. You can go outside that list, find ISO certified shops, and you give them a test part, and you say, hey, make this bushing for us real quick, and we'll pay you. We just want to see, if you can hold our tolerances, if your procedures are on point, and that's the processes they go through when they're trying to find new shops, because their places are constantly looking for new shops. I mean, I don't think any one, any company gets their any parts from just one shop, and I don't think any company should get their parts from just one shop, because what if catastrophe happens? But that's a whole nother story. And
yeah, yeah,
but in that aspect, yeah. So sorry, you have to just do your research of the shop, see who's used the shop, see their relevance in the industry, and go from there. And yeah, they could put the writing on the wall. You're absolutely right with that. But if you do your due diligence, you'll find out if it's just toilet paper or if it's actually worth something.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about your experiences with the audit. And you mentioned that you have been audited, what, more than 100 times? So
Well, not
when
not in bad ways. It's just because I'm not saying audited, because being audited is not always bad.
and glad that you clarified that. Audit
Yes,
means good.
yes. Well, absolutely. Yeah. Internal audits, you have to do internal audits, and then especially for the ISO processes, you have to do those internal audits to make sure you're still following those processes and procedures. Because you got 200 people and you got 30 of them doing the wrong thing, you're going to have a hell of a catastrophe on your hands. So, yeah, I've been audited quite a bit from bad to good, and then seeing that process, getting started
Yeah,
was fun too. I mean, the guy comes in, we have to, we sat there, and my brother, he was the quality manager at the shop we were talking about. Um, he wrote the procedures, and I helped where I could, and because I'm not a quality manager by any means, but
yeah,
I do know a few things, and yeah, and then they come in, and it's about depending on what you're doing, which ISO you're doing, we're doing 9001, and so it was a 3 to 6 month process, depending on, and this was during COVID, so it was all a lot of it was remote, so that was good. But the guy would come down probably once a month,
yeah,
and then he'd send us back, all the stuff we need to fix, and he'd come back and check it and send us back everything that you need to fix. And it's a whole process and procedure. And then they have to go to, that company and saying, hey, these guys are good to go. You can use them. Or, even if you're just doing the compliant thing too, it's like you can go and you can hire an ISO guy to come and check out your compliancy, and then you can relay that to them just to confirm your compliancy as well to get that business. And I've seen compliant companies, don't get me wrong, actually be very, very successful in ISO situations to where they've never gone full certification, but they're still doing a good portion of their business just because their machining is just so on point. So it just depends on you. I mean, if you're following those processes and stuff, then it's good.
Yeah, so tell me some stories where the specifics of where typically the problems are going to happen. So let's say, and again, I am not talking about bad way of auditing. I'm talking about, let's say, if somebody does not have experience of going through the audit process, what are they going to expect? What kind of problems are being typically highlighted? Are they related to changes on the shop floor? Are they related to replacing machines? Are they related to replacing people? So give us some examples of those stories where you went through the audit experience and maybe it was a shock for you that you were not expecting that. It may be a surprise. If it was not surprise, you would have fixed it by now, right? By then.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, I've never seen anybody, suggest changing machines or anything like that, or employees for that. I don't think they don't really look at the machine aspect and the employee aspect of what they're doing. They more look at the final product and not the final product, the processes from getting the material to making the final product, not what's entailed in that, but not the machine used or whatever, but it's just that how it's done the correct way. We were lucky enough when we were doing it, we didn't really have a lot of backlash. I would say that whole process, like I said, it starts in your quality department. So that guy, whoever you get to write the procedure, if it's you or whatever, it could be, depending on what you're trying to do as well, it could be the easiest, you can just get a kind of a sample of one and start breaking it off from there. Like, I know my brother, he had some previous, experience with Nikiso being their quality guy. So he already knew that whole process and how to do it and put it all together, which was, great. And it made things go a lot smoother. So I didn't really have like a lot of backlash problems, but the thing I could say is I had they're sticklers. So you go pretty much section by section. How do you do your ordering processes? How do you do your receiving processes? How do you do, and it's just one by one by one, and it has to be worded in a way to where it's, anybody can read it and understand it. And, the processes I'm talking about. So you can essentially, a person can come in, read your processes and procedures and not really need a whole lot of training, because that's how in depth these things should be. So I wouldn't say we had a lot of pushback. I would say the only thing is, and then you have, like I said, you have to do the material separation. You have to, label everything that, you should be labeling it anyway, but there's a different labeling process for, commercial and, non-ISO and non-AS stuff, way different. And companies absolutely treat it the same, and I've seen companies, I've walked into shops where they just keep the material together and they just say it's all just one, and that in case they do ever get audited, and then they just somehow know. And so those are the shops that don't stick around too long though either, Sam. So when you're trying to push, pull one past, these processes and procedures, you may ride that train for a little bit, but you're going to get caught and it's going to backfire, and it's going to be very, detrimental to your business. Because of that, your reputation is going to go away. You're going to lose a lot of business because now you're the guy that wanted to bypass those procedures. And but he was a really nice gentleman. He came in and he sat with us for a couple days, and then he came back a month later, and we just fixed whatever. And it's not like it's hard, or not like mean people or anything. It's just they're just very sticklers, that's all. And I'm trying to think of examples of anything we've had to fix in that aspect.
In the pre-show, when we were discussing about the ISO, you mentioned a couple of charts and the color codes and a lot of different things on your document. So why are those color codes important? What do shop owners need to do when they are going through the journey of ISO in implementing these color codes? Is that part of the ISO requirement? Can you talk about those color
No,
codes?
no, that's just more or less just for visual aid. The color codes were labeling, and you can do it however you want. It does have to be does have to have some kind of difference to it. So I mean, but the routers all can generally look the same as long as the information is different. The color coding actually is a good idea because you just know which company is which when it's going around your shop. So I mean, you come up and you see a blue folder, you know that's such and such, and or you see a brown one, and that's so you don't have to really ask questions, especially if you're working on projects. I got to go work on this project, and it's kind of a dumbed down version, and it's just to speed things up, but labeling the routers and stuff like that, those are just or planners or travelers, whatever we want to call them. Labeling those is something very helpful in every shop. I think color coding everything like that would act, in the labeling aspect of things is good for shop, but it is a requirement, not the color aspect, but the labeling aspect of things. My understanding of the color coding that you just mentioned is you are trying to identify, which order belongs to which customer. So on the shop floor, why is it important to know which order belongs to whom? You are simply producing a job. I guess it really doesn't. Honestly, it only matters to the account managers or project managers. I guess it's just for their general knowledge. They know just what they're working on and stuff. And it depends on how your shop's laid out too. I mean, because every shop has their strengths and weaknesses, So you got guys that work on the aerospace, and you got guys that work on the commercial. So if it's also because you have to just lay, and I don't mean this in a negative way. In certain shops, you just have to lay everything out there, so it's so blatantly obvious you can't have any pushback on it. So the color coding and stuff like that, it helps everybody because it's like, hey, I'm looking for Triumph job, and then you have to go and find instead of going through 100 pieces of white paper, you could just go to the blue or green or whatever color it is, and you already know that's the shop, and that's as the machinist or as the project manager. And I guess it doesn't really, it just helps visually for everybody, and then it just identifies what you're working on in that aspect, just so they know what they're doing too. But it's not really a requirement by any means. Okay. So that's it for today, Derek. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts? What I've learned, in the ISO, I think it just depends on where your shop wants to go. If you want to create more opportunity for yourself, then I think ISO is definitely a good thing to at least look into or implement a few of those things around your shop because it's good practice and procedures, and it gives you more availability to go after more jobs. And down that road, you can look into AS and expand on that as well, and it just gives you more. But I don't know if you want to go down the AS rabbit hole. But other than that, no, I think my experience in ISO, the only negative I would have to say is just the meetings. There's too many, but everything else is great. I actually liked ISO, and I actually learned a lot about how manufacturing could be done better with the proper procedures and processes. And as long as you, from your end, as long as you get a good ERP system and included with that, then you're good to go. Okay, and my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be ISO, irrespective of whether you are getting certified or not, the processes are going to be super important for you. They can help you get additional business. They can help you improve your efficiencies. They can also help improve your bottom line. So it's only for your benefit if you truly mean the ISO processes the way they were designed to help you. On that note, Derek, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode. Hey, thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Derek, follow him on LinkedIn. Links and more information
will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Mark Evans, who discusses the manufacturing and engineering processes of a Boeing supplier. Also, the interview with Clay Coleman, who discusses the importance of a QMS system and why it matters for manufacturing and distribution companies. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.